Every life tells a story. Join Frank Julian as he shares his one chapter at a time from Story of a Soul 2, releasing every Wednesday.
The Story of a Soul 2 by Frank Julian with Sean O'Neill, narrated by Frank Julian. Chapter 26, Unexpected Support. Providence is usually seen with hindsight. Not in this case. I could see with spiritual eyes that God was helping me. On the day of the second shipment, I went to World Medical Relief and learned the procedure for labeling the 4x4x4s. As things were being prepared for me to label, I met a man named Ron. We hit it off as I told him my story. He was a pharmacist at the Detroit Public Health Department. He took pictures of the shipment. I told him my son Frankie was going to be a pharmacist and was studying at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Ron said that he was an adjunct faculty member in the same division of the university and wanted Frankie to do a rotation with him. I told Frankie, and as to be expected, he said, "We'll see." Frankie would, in fact, later choose to do that rotation with Ron in his senior year. He had Frankie do a search of the literature on the relationship of nutrition and antiretroviral medication in the treatment of HIV/AIDS. Frankie did a thorough job, and his PowerPoint presentation summarizing his research has become the scientific basis for FAWN. Antiretroviral medication reduces viral count. The Ensure is needed to build T cells in those with HIV/AIDS, turning it into a chronic disease rather than a fatal disease. The connection between medication and nutrition would impact the growth and credibility of FAWN in the future. Each shipment seemed to have its own story. One shipment involved a Boy Scout earning his Eagle Scout status by raising $1,000 for Ensure for Africa. His father was so proud of him when he brought me the check. As we prepared for a return visit and two shipments, one for South Africa, one for Botswana, a story on Ensure for Africa was aired and presented by Sherry Magolis, a reporter for one of the local Detroit television stations. She did a beautiful job, and the community awareness increased in the aftermath. We started to have can drives at different churches and schools. I was invited to Rotary clubs, and each time there would be a story in the paper. I felt that the word given to me about stories appearing in the paper was coming to pass. A high school in Dearborn, Divine Child, had me speak to the whole school. Then they hosted an event called The Prize is Right. Girls in homecoming dresses earned points for prizes donated by local businesses, and the history teacher was Bob Barker. I sat there and was touched to see them work this hard. They raised over $1,000. We needed money for shipping rather urgently, and this was an ideal blessing at the ideal time. Richard, a local attorney, had a 90-second spot in the morning, and he featured Ensure for Africa. One time, I was on the local Today Show to talk about our program. We got calls from many schools, and we had can drives to collect liquid nutrition for our next shipment. A funny thing happened to me. I was taking a course on HIV/AIDS. I was a nurse, but needed a more thorough understanding of the disease and its methods of treatment. I was required to do clinical rotations. A few days after the Today Show TV spot aired, I was doing one of the clinical rotations and was sitting in an exam room with a man who had developed AIDS. We discussed this case. Then he said to me, "You're never going to believe this. There is a man collecting liquid nutrition to send to Africa." I said, "Did someone tell you? Are you a plant?" No, he protested. I said, "I'm that guy." "That's special that you saw that and told me." I was busy as an associate pastor, a full-time home care nurse, a husband and father, and now I was launching a nonprofit. A major newspaper, the Detroit Free Press, made me the person of the week, and a man named Leon read it. He sent a $10,000 check to World Medical Relief for Ensure for Africa. I knew it was the money that I needed to branch off from the church and form a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We got a lawyer to do the application, but he said that we could not call it Ensure for Africa, as that was a federally trademarked name. I struggled with the name. One Sunday, I was sitting in the living room with my family after dinner. My daughter said, "Call it FAWN, Fighting AIDS with Nutrition." I said, "Yes." 3 years later, I would look at an old, dilapidated Ensure for Africa business card. Right underneath, under Ensure for Africa, in the small letters, with the words fighting AIDS with nutrition. Someone else had named it fawn before I did. I was taken aback by that. I went back to Africa in 2004. We had a team, and we sent 2 shipments ahead of us to arrive when we were there, one to South Africa and one to Botswana. We were warmly greeted in Pietermaritzburg by Pastor Quentin and his church. They had some very nice plans for us. We were eager to distribute the shipment. The supervisory doctor accompanied us. She was very knowledgeable and appreciative of what we were doing. She allowed us access into the inner sanctum where the loved ones lay dying. We prayed and sang to them. I was given one of the greatest privileges of my life when I was allowed to feed the Ensure to these patients. To me, Ensure was a common product, but to them, it was a life-giving means of survival. Their soil is not as fertile, and their food lacks some of our nutrients. In America, we might discard it, or at the very least, take it for granted, but not there.
Thank you for listening. Join Frank Julian every Wednesday for a new chapter of Story of a Soul 2. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter.